Imagine, a podcast series by Imagine Theatre.
Yes, hello again. I'm Martin Ballard. Welcome to episode 62 of this podcast series as we discuss the use of technology in pantomime and how it helped the genre to evolve.
For more information, go to their website at www.imaginetheatre.co.uk.
In the last episode, I was at the Royal Spa Centre in Leamington Spa to take a look behind the scenes at the latest Imagine photo shoot and to meet some of the team and cast members from all over the UK. Don't forget, if you missed that or any of the other previous episodes, you can still listen to them. They are still available, and we've had some fabulous guests so far, from the Imagine Theatre headquarters team to performers and backstage team members at the various Imagine shows. We've talked about everything from how pantomime is produced, its history, and of course, its future. And there are many more episodes to come from one of the UK's biggest producers of pantomime and children's theatre. Well, this time I've been joined by a team of technical creatives to discuss how technology continues to help with the evolution of pantomime. With me is Imagine's artistic director, Eric Potts, head of operations, Dave Edmunds, and we'll also hear from Nina Dunn, who is the creative director and lead designer at PixelLux. Dave, let's start with you if we can, because we've not met you before. Just tell us a little bit about your role. What does head of operations actually mean?
Hi, Martin. So head of operations is a very wide spectrum of job, I suppose. I deal with the logistics of the shows to make sure that actually everybody gets their correct sets and props and wardrobes in the right venues. I deal with the health and safety of the productions and the company, and look after the warehouse of all of our equipment,
Which is vast.
Yeah, we're currently in about a 12,000 square foot unit. We've got 30 sets stored in our unit in Coventry, and then we've got off-site storage dotted around in a few places where just as an overspill.
And what was your background before coming to Imagine, Dave? What were you doing before?
I spent my whole working life working in technical theatre, generally from starting many moons ago with Jamie Corbett, actually, at the Royal and Derngate as a flyman, working up to become technical production manager in Windsor and also at the Alex in Birmingham.
Well, I think it's fair to say none of us are in the prime of our youth, and we have lots of recollections of changes in theatre over our lifetimes. And Eric, I think that it's fair to say pantomime has always been at the cutting edge of new technology as a very popular form of entertainment, hasn't it?
Hi, Martin. Yes, it really has. It's a funny conundrum with Panto because you have to be careful that you don't push it too far, that you don't try and be clever with it. Because I always say that people who are actually buying the tickets for Panto are doing so in the hope that the children or the grandchildren or whatever that they are bringing have the same experience that they had 25, 40 years earlier. So you have to be clever that all the traditional elements are within the structure of the show, but at the same time, literally from the word go, it has always sought to bring a new effect, a new bit of impact to the show, going right back through the various stages of, Curry's Dancing Waters, where you had fountains all over the stage, visual effects. They used to use tanks in the very early days at Drury Lane, where the performers would be swimming underwater. And there's been through 3D development of various scenes, right up to where we are now, where the cutting-edge digital technology is moving the art form forward.
Back in time, everything from the introduction of a trapdoor to something called Pepper's Ghost, which some of our listeners may not know about, Eric. These have all been innovations, haven't they, that have actually improved, what the audience see, but without changing the actual genre itself.
Ideal. That's I think what every producer would be absolutely screaming for, something that's going to have that real impact, that is going to push ticket sales, but at the same time, it is very recognizably a traditional panto. And as you say, there's been all sorts of wonderful things. We think back to the clever use of trapdoors in the stage. And sadly, Dave will know, they're really a sort of a dying feature of modern theatres. There are very few theatres that still have operational trapdoors. Those that have, a lot of them, the apparatus hasn't been renewed and has been condemned, so it can't be used anyway. And things like Pepper's Ghost, which are all sort of visual effects, which are all very clever. These are great innovations, and really Panto has been the one to exploit them to their full. as the genre has progressed.
And Dave, in terms of lighting and sound, I mentioned briefly before we started the recording about the change in lighting alone in the past 25, 30 years. Back in the day, you had a limited choice of floods or spots, gels, gobos, but then movers came in, and now we're in the world of LEDs, of course.
Technology does move on so fast, and actually, by the time we probably put the podcast out, we'll probably have some new technology coming in. I mean, it is the fact of going away from gels and now going into LEDs, where you can pretty much have any color you want, has really given lighting designers more flexibility.
And the computerized systems that actually change the lighting states helps an awful lot. There was a time when you had to climb ladders to focus and all sorts of things. It's made the job easier, Dave, as well, hasn't it?
In some respects, it's made the job easier, Martin, of course. There's always the element where you now need to know how to program the lighting desk in a very different way to what you did when I first started. And unfortunately, there are always 2 or 3, 4 or 5 different desks that people like to use. So it's about knowing as much about them all as possible.
The other technical innovation has been automated flying. And I'm talking about flying of set rather than actors now, Dave, but that's made a big difference as well. It's perhaps more complicated, and I guess it's less easy to react to stuff that is happening because it all has to be pre-programmed. But that's changed an awful lot, and in health and safety terms as well.
Absolutely. I mean, there are a few theatres around the country that have fully automated flying. Actually, a couple of ours do, and we also put into our digital shows an automated flying system. Yes, it takes the program. The program is very similar to in a lighting desk in the way that you just have to know the system. It means the shows are always going to be accurate. It counts effectively, so it's always going to land on its dead perfect. So you don't have any of the human error.
And Eric, in terms of flying of actors, it's expected really with Peter Pan. It's not exclusive to that show though, but flying when it was introduced was another of those revelations that audiences loved.
Peter Pan's the obvious title, the boy who never grows up. It flies in through the nursery window to begin with, and Tinkerbell, his fairy, if it's being performed by an actress as opposed to just a spotlight or something. It was great, and it got gasps. And nowadays, as Dave says, with the continuing development of flying of humans as well as set pieces, a lot of it can be automated. You don't have to have 4 people standing in the wings pulling on ropes to fly Peter Pan and the Darling family across the stage towards Neverland. It really can be breathtaking. And of course, as the actual hardware, shall we say, of these illusions has developed, it's almost sometimes impossible to see the wires these days because they've managed to get them thinner and thinner. I remember going to see a production of the Broadway production of Aladdin over in New York, and we were, I think, about 4 rows from the front. The friends had got us some fantastic seats, and the magic carpet came on, and it was a magic carpet. You just could not see how it was being suspended in midair, and that again is about just creating that moment of the wow factor, the impact for the audience that just makes it so special.
One thing we've always talked about through all of the podcasts really is how pantomime brings all areas of the entertainment business together. Magicians and magic have become an integral part of pantomime, and I guess some of those illusions, the flying carpet and so on, have been taken from magicians as well.
Yeah, a lot of the techniques are what we would have previously considered from an illusionist, from a magic point of view. And we have several magic consultants that we work with throughout the year to create those moments, be it levitations, be it flying, be it the transformation of the prince into the beast in Beauty and the Beast, whatever those moments are. And there's the old saying, it's all done with smoke and mirrors. And with all good illusion, that it's very often the most simple technique that is so cleverly presented that makes an illusion work. It's wonderful that we can actually achieve those moments as part of our narratives now, to bring those extra layers to the pantos we're presenting.
And Eric, you mentioned the water tanks and dancing waters, and there's always been a possibility to use a speciality act or something, as a set piece. And we've talked about set pieces before. For many, many years, a UV scene was a staple part of every panto. I wonder whether you've ever done a UV scene yourself, Eric, getting dressed up in blacks and going out there, not knowing that the wardrobe person had actually washed your blacks in with some white sheets or something, and you look like a star cloth.
There are stories, aren't there? I don't think I've ever been. I don't think there's enough black material to cover me, Martin, to be honest. But I think the old. It's funny because the UV sequences were a great panto staple, but then very often for a great number of years, you go and see the summer seasons at any of the resorts around the country, and you'd see Pavlov's puppets or the Black Theatre of Prague doing, the dancing ostriches or something. Because it was such a clever technique, but was so effective, it was used, almost everywhere. I can remember, and it's linked to another matter that we haven't discussed, seeing a wonderful UV sequence at the old Gaiety Theatre in Ayr, which, I still can't quite work out how it was done, but as a child watching it was wonderful. But I was thinking, when I was thinking about that story, about going to see the pantos there, and the performers would perform the scene, and then there'd be a number, and 3 microphones would be pushed up through the stage on stands. And all the actors would then come down stage, assemble around these microphones, sing a song, because there were no radio mics, and then they would vanish down at the end of the song, and the actors would go back up to their positions and finish the scene without the radio mics that we've all become so used to now. And yet you still never managed to, you didn't miss anything vocally. It was just all done with projection and then mics at the right moment to cover up the organ and drums.
You're absolutely right. Of course, back in the day, before any amplification, actors were trained to project and, had to work without any microphones. Then cable microphones and stand microphones came in. And now, of course, radio mics are commonplace. Dave, in terms of the stage and the set and so on, I think it's fair to say Imagine were one of the leading pantomime companies with automated animatronic horses, flying carpets, but also the flying Cinderella coach and so on. We've seen automation of trucks on stage for a number of years now, coming and going. That has opened up all sorts of areas in terms of design for sets and so on, hasn't it?
Going to the stable that we have of 6 horses sitting in our warehouse, that was very much a forefront of one of the first elements of automation in set design that we've got in our warehouse. But I think the automation is pushing forward with everything. We have screens flying which are part of our sets. We fly them with using a system that gives us full capability of whatever speed we want, how far we want to travel, and it just gives you a much better look on stage and smoother, and it always runs to complete times.
Yeah, and that's also included in a smaller way in the giant's head, an animatronic giant's head, which, means that the mouth and eyes move and so on, and audiences thankfully don't analyze this sort of thing. They just see it as part of an amazing spectacle, don't they?
Yeah, the giant's heads are a great bit of kit, and that's all controlled by a remote control in the wings. Very similar to the sort of things that would have been on shows like the Tweenies as well. They work on the same animatronic technology on the giants as well as the Tweenies, so it's very good technology that everyone uses.
Let's talk about audio and video as well, Eric, because you mentioned 3D being used. In fact, something else that we haven't mentioned, Ian Lachlan and Will Brenton at the Belgrade in Coventry, before Imagine ever existed, they did all sorts of things in an experimental way. I do remember they did a scratch and sniff panto where every audience member had a card, and when something happened, you scratched it and sniffed it, and the 2 characters in the panto were called Scratch and Sniff as well. So there's all sorts of ideas out there that have worked. But let's talk about audio and video, because Very often now you'll see a video element. I'm not talking about the sort of thing we'll talk to Nina about in a moment's time, but a dame's entrance, for instance, may have been filmed in and around the city where the panto is being staged, coming on a motorbike through the streets of whichever city and then arriving on stage on the same motorbike. That's been around for a while, hasn't it?
Yes, it has, those sort of techniques, and it always proves very popular. It's another aspect, I believe, that is hugely important to Panto, in that it gives it a sense of local ownership. And if you have an audience sitting there and seeing this pre-recorded footage of the dame or the comic, whoever, going through the town, passing by the shops or the sports centre or whatever that they regularly visit, they get a real thrill from that. And then from the actual Panto point of view, of course, at the right moment, you have the footage of them arriving at the theatre, coming through front of house, and then suddenly they appear on stage on the motorbike or with the shopping trolley or whatever has been in the video. It's a lovely moment that's been around for a while, but again, a nice comedy moment, creating that excitement, anticipation for the dame's arrival on stage.
And again, it's not actually changing pantomime, because that could possibly replace a front cloth so that the scene change can happen. The scene might change and then the dame comes on the motorbike at the end of the film. So it still fits the sort of the genre, doesn't it?
Exactly. And it's just about those things. Over the years, we've found new techniques, be it scratch and sniff or whatever, just to move the art form forward, go with the times, which of course is how Panto in many ways was born. There was a need for a vehicle for comics and performers of the day to keep themselves busy out of the summer seasons, and Panto was that. And so in many ways that was an innovation in itself that we as custodians of the genre are just constantly looking to push forward.
In terms of sound, Dave, the sound systems themselves have improved. We've talked about the evolution of amplification, radio mics and so on, but also in terms of recorded sound effects, music and so on, there are so many more things possible now than were possible maybe 30, 40 years ago.
Absolutely. We're now in the world of computers, as everyone knows. And what it means is that actually a lot of the show's sound effects are all programmed onto a computer, which means you can, press a key on the keyboard and it will make the sound that you're expecting. But, you can run multi-layers of audio onto one track. So, the MD can press go in the pit and actually you get a full soundscape come out, rather than just being, potentially 1, 2, 3 or full orchestra. But it means that actually you've got a full sounding soundscape from one computer effectively.
Well, joining me now is the creative director and lead designer at an innovative company called PixelLux. She's a multi-award-winning video and projection designer who's created work for a wide range of shows, working internationally and including everything from theatre and opera, dance and musical theatre in particular, through to fashion opening ceremonies, live events and public art. Nina Dunn, how are you, first of all?
Hi, thanks for having me. Yeah, I'm really well, thank you.
Okay, tell us a bit about your background, first of all, and a little bit about PixelLux and what it does.
So my background is in fine art and then film and broadcast design. So I'm, I suppose, an animator compositor by original trade. I moved into theatre about 15 years ago, and I felt it was a place where I could do much more work outside of a single screen and work with a larger scale composite. Instead of just working with mixed media, I was working with actors and lighting and sound and video, and then all of that being live. So that felt a much more thrilling path. And since then, I haven't looked back.
Just give us an idea of some of that cutting edge technology now, because we hear an awful lot about, projection mapping as an example, which I think maybe Disney was one of the first major companies to use at their theme parks. And we talk about animation and LCD screens and so on. Just tell us about that new technology and what it can do.
Well, I tend to think that using video within the scenario of a stage play or pantomime or musical theatre production is multifarious, really. You can do a lot with it. It can either belong to the scenic world, supporting location and that narrative, or it can be much more part of the lighting world, creating effects that one couldn't potentially create with lights as effectively. It can be super responsive to sound, especially when you're talking about gigs and live events. I just love being able to integrate with a three-dimensional space in that way and change it and really surprise people with that. We started the company PixelLux a couple of years ago now, and we've got a team of people who have to keep incredibly up to date with the latest developments. You know, a few years ago, it was all about particle effects that were reacting to sound. And then it's evolved so that we're now using game engines to create 3D scenery. And we created PixelLux so that we could bring on board young practitioners, people who have experience outside of theatre, but that bring things to the practice that are required in the latest to keep abreast of the latest developments. When I came into theatre, I was bringing my broadcast knowledge. The team that we have here have a wide range of skills, including incredible media service skills, live real-time graphics, game engine technology, AI, and all those kind of new discoveries of that we can now apply into theatre.
The live element is crucial still, though, isn't it, in terms of theatre in particular? You know, we've talked in the past about the developments in, you know, film and television, whether that be green screen, CGI, and stuff like that. But in theatre, this is enhancing the live performance, not replacing it.
I think what's brilliant about theatre and the way that it embraces stagecraft is that there is a leap of the imagination that you can make by using different stagecrafts, video being one of them, to surprise audiences. And what it does, especially where video is concerned, is it sort of cannibalizes other areas of practice like film and TV, some of the technologies that have been used there and are indeed on arguably much larger budgets, and also rock and roll. And they bring them into theatre and use them in a slightly different way, a sort of more narrative way. And video isn't supposed to replace either people or scenery on stage. It's supposed to enhance and embellish what you can do. So, for example, if you were trying to create a flying sequence with a character like Peter Pan, previously you might use some painted cloths, some lighting effects, and a performer flying within that to create the sense of flight. With video, you can take it one step further. You can use all of the previous elements described, but potentially instead of using a static scenic backdrop, you can use a much more immersive combination of, for example, front projection on a gauze and a moving LED image, so that you can create an incredibly immersive sense of flight and travel. So instead of replacing the theatre crafts that we have already, it just leaps them one step forward.
So it can also help in terms of scene changes and so on, and journeys. For instance, you know, historically in pantomime, you may have had a town square scene followed by a front cloth and then a move to somewhere else. Now that journey can be seen by the audience with animated screens behind, so you can follow the character on the journey.
Exactly. You know, the character can be found within a single camera move, and that can take as long or as short as it needs to take. Sometimes a scene change needs to happen in the blink of an eyelid so that you can get on with the action. And in other instances, you want to really explore that journey and create it as part of the narrative, sort of to describe where the characters come from, emotionally where they're going, and also physically where they're going. With people being much more used to consuming dynamic media like film and games, the expectation for action within theatre is now evolving, and people are enjoying a slightly more dynamic and immersive effect on stage, you know, where things like Pepper's Ghost and dark sequences with magic might have really, really shocked and surprised audiences previously. Adding another element like video can just take that one step further. I think for practitioners such as ourselves, the temptation to embellish the audience's experience is a given, really, because we can see what the technology can do, and we are part of the drivers of the evolution of that technology. We have to work harder to bring audiences back to the theatre. We have to continue to entertain to the level at which the modern attention span and expectation is tuned. And I think what's nice about theatre is that you are in the space with the action going on. It's not like watching a film. You're present with the actors. You have a very personal interplay with them. You're seeing eye to eye with them. And therefore, to surround that actor in something that also feels either filmic or like an adventure or a game or a scenario that also brings you into play in terms of the light that's also hitting you and the sound that's surrounding you, that makes theatre something that is more immersive than potentially watching a film, and gives the fullness of the live experience, not to mention the other audience members experiencing that with you. That's a whole part of the performance, is how everyone else in the audience is reacting at the same time. We're all really pleased to be able to get back together after having been in isolation for such a long time during the pandemic. So that collective experience, and enhanced by the latest developments in technology, is a really compelling drawback into the theatre.
And finally, where can this lead us to next? It literally means your imagination as a designer now has no bounds, does it?
I've been asked this question a few times. I've previously done a fair bit of teaching, and every time you try and second guess what the future holds, you can only ever be partially right. Where we're going as practitioners is into an open space where we have to be platform agnostic and software agnostic. We have to be constantly learning and changing and evolving our workflows. Within that, we also have to be looking at what audiences are enjoying and seeking out, and whether that's bringing theatre into more three-dimensional spaces like immersive theatre does, where you are involved in the action in a physical way, or whether that means employing technologies within a traditional theatre space. It's about having that dialogue with the audience and also having the dialogue with the technology. It's not always easy to achieve your keenest desires as a designer. You can see that there should be technology out there that you can join up together, and it's often a really hard won process to make that joining up happen. And that's why within PixelLux we have a brilliant team of engineers, and the designers sit there and pose questions. What if we did put that and that together? Would that be a good explosion? And the engineers sort of go away and scratch their heads and come back with an even bigger explosion and a whole lot of R&D that we need to do. But I think you have to use your imagination both in a creative and a technological way to work out what is the best and most compelling way of telling a story. One of my favourite games at the beginning of a theatre show process, putting a show together, is to sit around and ask whose tool is it anyway? Because quite often a thing that feels like it could be video might be better placed in sound, or something that was traditionally lighting could be taken on by video. So it's about the melding of all of those tools together. What's also brilliant about the developments in technology on a purely sort of techie logistical level is that the integration between all those departments is so much better. So, for example, working with Jamie Corbidge on the pantomimes with Imagine Theatre, we're working towards a place where he is able to control our virtual lights within our three-dimensional virtual sets, and a place where we're able to automatically take on board his colour scheme on stage without having to sort of program another cue, so that we can look at other details while certain things that we would spend time doing anyway are sort of automatically taken care of.
I tell you what, it's a fantastic job to have. It's an exciting day every day in your office. You must thoroughly enjoy getting up in the morning and going to work.
It is really exciting. My kids often look at what I'm doing on the computer and go, "Wow, Mummy, that's so cool." But obviously it comes with its pains and stresses. I feel like I and the team around me, that we were all sort of born in the right time in the world with the right technology around us to have a really fantastic career.
Nina, thank you so much for talking to us.
No problem. Nice to talk to you.
Dave, as Nina was saying there, these are exciting times. I mean, with the technology that's available now, who knows where we'll go in the future? Our imagination has no bounds, does it?
We are able to push the boundaries as far as we want, and as far as generally time allows us to. The technology is moving so quickly that every time we have a meeting, we're talking about different and exciting projects.
And Eric, in terms of the Panto itself, we've talked about whether stories may change, new titles may come in, others may disappear. The actual core values of Panto will stay the same. But where do you think technology might take it in the future? Do you think we might see a totally immersive pantomime in the round or whatever? How might it change?
It certainly could. And I think the joy of the developing technology is it really can take us in any direction. But I think with Panto, as I've said before, you just need to be careful you don't remove it as a piece of theatre from what people are expecting. I think unlike an awful lot of new explorative theatre, if people don't get what they're expecting to see, it actually turns it into a more negative experience for them. But things like, the digital work that Nina and her team at PixelLux have done for Imagine still bring this wonderful new concept to the stage. And in many ways, it ties in with what certainly the younger generation are expecting these days, because, of course, they're used to video games and they're streaming on all sorts of social media platforms. So they're used to things moving, pictures moving in front of them. And Nina's animation does that. But at the same time, and I think I can use an example where a certain colleague who happens to be on this podcast with me, we both sat in the circle watching our production of Cinderella at High Wycombe last year. And the interval came after the most beautiful transformation sequence. Cinderella goes to the ball and the carriage appears both on screen and on stage. It's all hugely clever, tied in, as Dave said, all time coded, so it works perfectly. And at the end of the sequence, Cinderella was flying off to the ball, and Dave and I turned to each other, and there were two, shall we say, middle-aged men with a glisten in their eyes going, oh yes, that's worked very well. Yes, that's good. It really still gets us. That's exactly what it should be. When it stops getting us and just becomes about the technology rather than the story that the technology is helping to tell, then I think we need to reassess where we're going with it.
What Eric was saying there, Dave, is that you have to move with the times because expectations change. And just as back in the day when we only had radio, expectations at the theatre were different. Once television came in, people expected different things in their panto, not least the stars of television at the time. And now with gaming and all sorts of digital offers, streaming services or on television or whatever, even at the cinema, young people particularly expect to see that sort of quality at pantos as well, don't they?
The key thing that Eric and I have definitely spoken about over the time is that whilst the digital shows are amazing, what we want to keep is that it's still a theatre production. It isn't just like watching a TV or watching the cinema. You still have to be part of that production. You still have to enjoy what you're watching. And actually the digital shows really do bring it out to the audience. The audience love them because they are actually still theatre. And that's key to what we're trying to achieve.
Panto could be compared to theme parks in a way, because theme parks have had animatronics for a long time, along with painted set and so on. They're using screens and more immersive ways now of actually entertaining the people that go to theme parks and enjoy theme park rides. And that's the same with Panto. So, the sort of animation that we're talking about is enhancing what we already have, not replacing it, isn't it?
People want to go and enjoy themselves and be entertained. And that's what we're trying to give them, a really good couple of hours where they can sit and watch a really entertaining production.
It's very difficult to predict the future, isn't it? Who would have thought 50 years ago that we'd be able to do what we can do now? So it's really difficult to guess what might happen, isn't it?
It really is. And the thing with technology of this nature that, sort of Nina's talked us through, there is no boundary. They're finding a new way of pushing it forward. In the very short time between the creation of our digital Cinderella, and then our digital Beauty and the Beast, the team at PixelLux had discovered a whole new way of basically, for Beauty and the Beast, building a gaming landscape that you would normally expect on a high-tech computer game, so that they created the whole environment in which Beauty and the Beast is set: the village, the castle, the wood, the tavern between the two, the river. And they, you say, well, we will just travel there, and they'd press a few buttons, and on the screens we would travel from the village, we'd walk through or fly over and be in the Beast's castle before you know it. And it's absolutely incredible. So there's so much happening now, but there's so much development that I know is still going to happen. And I know, Martin, you and I, we with our families are regular cruise ship punters, shall we say. And the bigger cruise ship companies, they're investing thousands of pounds on their technology for their shows. And I was recently on one of the Royal Caribbean ships, and they have an ice rink, of course, as you do in the middle of the ocean, where you go and see this ice show, which began with a drone show. and there were, I don't know, 100 drones flying around with LED lights on it, flying around over the ice rink before the performers come on. And you just think, well, where is this going to stop? It's just going to go on forever. And then we went to see one of the theatre shows, and there was a full-size biplane with an actor in it playing one of the Wright brothers, flew out over the auditorium and round in a big circle. And you just think, there's always going to be someone looking for another way, pushing the boundaries of what can happen, not only in theatre, but specifically in this instance in Panto.
I guess the only real boundary, Dave, in terms of any of this is expense and keeping within any sort of budget, because, a theatre that's doing a 12-month or longer run, or a cruise line that's going to be running for decades with that technology, can recoup the investment. It has to be a manageable investment for a short run in a Panto, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Most of our Pantos are, looking at a 5-week playing time, which it doesn't give a massive amount of time for return on finances, but it's budget and also probably time. We have to remember that we don't, we put Pantos on in a week of fit up effectively, and there's only 2 days of physically building a set, so any more than that doesn't allow for us to create all this magic. But we've got some really good teams that work with us, and we seem to be able to be getting a lot of work done in a very small amount of time.
Yeah, well, you've got a massive store there that's bursting at the seams. You've already spent a lot of time feeding the animatronic horses in the stables every day. How do you feel about having 300 drones to look after or something?
Well, it'd be somewhat different, wouldn't it? I mean, we'd have to learn how to use them all. Do we all have to go and get pilot licenses then and stuff? Certainly being this close to the airport, I'm sure we'd get told off flying 300 drones around.
And Eric, what about some of the things we've mentioned? Do you think we might see any of those coming back? Is there any chance of a company being able to afford a water tank in a major venue anymore?
It's just such a huge, not only expense, but just logistical challenge. I know you can still, I've seen the dancing waters, coloured fountains appearing still in various shows around the country. It would be great just to see those things just from the point of view of absolute spectacle. We are doing a production of The Little Mermaid up in Kirkcaldy this year. I'm not sure we'll fully stretch to a full-size stage water tank, but we're certainly attempting to fly our Little Mermaid around the stage. So yeah, it'd be great. I mean, wouldn't it be wonderful to travel back and see these things as they actually happened, and see how the trapdoors were used to their best, and the old thunder runs and things where, at the top of the stage, they literally rolled balls down wooden conveyors to create the feeling of thunder, the sound of thunder. It'd be great to just experience those again, but I'm not fully sure there's some of them that we will see again.
Well, it's certainly an exciting time, and anybody who comes to see the Imagine shows at Christmas this year will see lots of this. It's evident in all of the Imagine shows. Eric and Dave, thank you so much for talking to us.
No, thank you.
Thank you, Martin.
And that's it for now, I'm afraid. As I said earlier, there are many more episodes to come with some fabulous guests, so please subscribe through your favourite podcast app. And make sure you join me next time for episode 63, when I'll be chatting to the Scottish actor, singer and director Andrew Agnew.
Thank you for listening to the latest edition of Just Imagine, the podcast series from Imagine Theatre. And you can find out more by going to www.imaginetheatre.co.uk.